If you feel like you're the one that's always solving the problems, everything comes back to you. You're the one that makes the key decisions. You're the one that keeps things flowing. You're the one that says yes to this and no to that so that everybody responds and acts. Then the real challenge that you face is your leadership team is not leading and executing. And that's the thing we're going to focus on today. I'm going to talk to you about the 3 biggest mistakes that occur inside leadership teams that prevent them from being high functioning, high performing teams, and what you can do to fix them, the exact systems and processes I use. So that's what we're going to get into today. So I've got 3 things I want to talk to you about. But before we do, one of the biggest things I often see is things have stalled out. You might even be saying like, hey, we're just kind of doing business as usual or the status quo, or even worse, we're just constantly in this treadmill of, fighting fires and reacting. This happens all the time. And what I find most frequently generates this or develops this is because over time, we get more and more entrenched in the work and we shift to some of our basic tactics around what we learned as individual contributors. So what happens in the leadership team, especially like in an executive leadership team where you're responsible for very big moves, very big revenue goals, et cetera, those teams will often default to their individual contributor skills rather than recognizing the collective genius and what they're here to do as a total group. So what we want to work on are 3 different things that basically prevent a team from stalling out. They unblock teams that have got a lot of potential, but for whatever reason are stuck. And so let's get into number 1. All right. So the real big idea right off the bat is your team doesn't need more tactics. They don't need more like how to at a deep level. What they need to do is think more like leaders, which is a much higher level. So a lot of times I like to think about this as like a me, we, all of us. A lot of times our leaders are stuck in a me mindset rather than a we mindset. And as you know, whenever we're in me mode, it's very selfish. It's very inward focused. It's what we're trying to accomplish, what we're trying to do. And sometimes as a CEO, we might even be in the me mode so much that we're not enabling we's and all of us kind of thinking. So that's kind of the first area is we want to shift out of this deeply tactical mode and we want to elevate our leaders to think strategically on the business, not necessarily in the business. And so how do we do that? How do we think that way? First off, we've got to recognize that whenever we're firefighting, whenever we're in reaction mode, what that really means is we're not in the driver's seat. We're not moving things forward strategically. We're not focused on impact. We're not prioritizing. We're not directing our biggest objectives. Instead, the day is kind of telling us what to do. It's predicting our action rather than us prescribing the action for the day, right? So we want to shift from reactive mode to proactive. And that proactive needs to be based on what's going to make an impact, what's going to make a difference. So we're going to elevate the leader's thinking to where is the impact? How do I enable more impact for the business, not more reactionary work? So naturally, that means we're going to have to think about trade-offs. We're going to have to think about prioritization because we can't do it all. And if you think you can, that's just not possible. We have to be focused. We have to be focused on things that generate value, things that actually move the needle and get stuff done. So we've got to have good priorities and we've got to have good focus so that now we're not just reacting, we're enabling the value that we want to create. This is kind of the first step in moving towards a concept around speed to value. How quickly can we create and deliver value into the marketplace or into the customer's hands or into our downline employees that are doing more of the work that we can't get to in the individual contributor mode? So we got to think about those priorities enabled for impact. How do we do that? Well, for one, you could use the 4 core questions framework. For example, you can see more about that at 4corequestions.com. And what that does is it brings the collective group together and it taps into their genius by really getting into what's helping them prioritize what's important for the business, where the biggest blockers are, things like that. So when you do this as an activity, it gets people aligned and they're all thinking about the same thing. And then as you go through that process, you're able to create insights that come out of the collective genius of the team, working on what's most important, what's holding the business back and all that. So that's a big shift from just reactionary work to being strategic by curating the right work that is impactful. How do we get to impactful work? Well, part of impact is about knowing what's high effort and low effort, what's high impact, low impact. So a lot of times I like to think about this as like 4 corners or a big plus sign. And what we want to look for are the things that are high impact and they're reasonable effort. And what I find most often happens is over time, we put off really hard things because we are not sure how we're going to execute them. We haven't put enough time towards them. Maybe we don't have enough experience. And what really begins to occur is we've put on the sidelines of our business the high impact, high effort work. And a lot of times that's the stuff that moves the needle the most. If we would actually go into that high impact, high effort work, we'll find we'll have an explosive growth opportunity because it's usually there where your biggest breakthroughs are. So a lot of times what we do is we prioritize quick wins and low hanging fruit, which can be fine. But most often our real accelerator, our real growth opportunity is in that high impact, high effort work because nobody's getting around to it. So we want to look at that work. We want to make trade-offs. We want to prioritize things that are going to make a big impact. And we want to create a vocabulary in our leadership team around selecting things that are impactful rather than things that are easy or things that maybe serve our departments or maybe even kind of hit some of the like pet peeves of the CEO or whatever. We want to create a space where it's not just that we're doing what everybody thinks is like best or easiest to do or most fulfilling to them. Sometimes we have to level up to the next level of real value creation where that pursuit of the challenge creates fulfillment in and of itself so that we can have a breakthrough and we can finally get rid of some of these real issues that are holding the business back. And the way that we get to that place of what's holding the business back is to think more strategically in 90 days. I like to call them value horizons. And so as we start to go from really understand the collective genius, the things that we should be working on, those high impact, high effort things, those things move us down a path of how do we plan it? How do we orchestrate it? How do we decide what comes in which order? And so value horizons help us really chunk it down into something that we can clearly define as results that we want to achieve. And then what structures, what builds out that ladder that we can kind of walk up to get those results. And a lot of times those individual things or the projects or the individual items we're used to doing. But in most cases, we're adding new elements that are based on impact that we've often ignored, meaning we kind of do half the job because that's the easy low-hanging fruit, but we don't do the other half because that's the really difficult stuff. And for whatever reason, we just keep putting it off. So in this case, a value horizon helps us understand the real value we want to create and then the individual parts and pieces that are high impact, the most valuable pieces to move us forward in that value horizon. This reframes what a goal is. This reframes sort of what our objectives are in a way that's more clearly articulate to the team so that we can create real value based on impact. And what's amazing about this is for the CEO can see the team is orchestrating around value creation and really picking apart the individual pieces that drive the most value. And they can tell stories, meaningful stories around what that value looks like and why it's impactful. And a lot of times I find that the CEO gets trapped in a decision-making loop because for whatever reason, it seems that the CEO is the only one thinking about these problems in a holistic way or the only one that has the authority to make the decisions. Whereas when you go through a process like this, the whole team aligns around it. Everybody gets to play a part and speak to what's going on so that collectively you surface the right things and you all agree and you go, okay, I get it. We've got some healthy debate on these priorities and these trade-offs, and we're trying to drive this direction because we can now see the bigger picture of what doing these things does for the business, either new things it creates or problems it solves or bottlenecks it removes. And so it creates the right conversations that direct the organization in a more meaningful way and take some of the pressure off of it always just being a CEO-led decision point. So this brings us to really the number 2 big mistake here is we're not really solving the right problems. Instead, we're just staying busy. So what we want to do is we want to shift to a leadership team that's solving the right problems by being able to kind of dive deep and do a root cause analysis. And so, like, for example, if we said, hey, we need better ads because we're not getting enough leads. Is it really that we need better ads? Or is it that we have a messaging problem? Or are we talking to the wrong customer type? Do we have the wrong avatar? Are there other things inside that list of potential reasons why we're not getting the results we want in lead creation? That's what we mean. Like, how do we follow that down into the real problem versus the surface level problem? So I use ads just as an easy thing that everybody understands. But a lot of times when we are in reactionary mode, we might say we can't get all this done because we need more people, right? And so that seems to be the answer is we just need more people. If we had more people on staff, we get more of this work done. But see, that's kind of the flaw because at the surface level, it might feel like we need more labor, more manpower, and it could be true, but usually it's not. Usually there's something else that's going on that's catching all the sort of attention focus in that reactionary process. And that usually reveals something around our systems, our methodologies. Maybe we need some automation. Maybe we need some new tools. Maybe we need some new technology. Perhaps we might even need an outside consultant or somebody else to help us understand and see what we can't see for ourselves, because we're in this sort of pattern, this loop, and we need to break out of that loop. But we've got to get to some of the root causes that are driving those problems. So part of that is we do something like the 4 core questions that I mentioned earlier, and the outputs of those, we start to really interrogate the individual pieces and start to say, well, if this is an issue and this is an issue and these kind of have a pattern, what does that really tell us the real issue is? And those are really where you find what I call problem statements. So if you were to go through, a normal leadership team of 5 people and everybody was to do like a problem purge, they're listing all their problems and challenges of the reasons why they believe they're not making an impact or the organization is stuck or whatever the meaningful sort of frame is that we're in here, then what they're going to uncover is a multitude of challenges through their lens. And then as everybody starts to move around, they're going to say, hey, well, there's actually a bigger pattern here. It looks like the problem is we don't have enough focus or attention in this part of the business, or it looks like we have a system that's incomplete. We don't know what the process is once it gets here, so everybody's scrambling, right? So like once you get in that place, you can then describe a real problem statement. And a real problem statement is well framed. It articulates what's actually going on, and it always starts with the problem is, right? So the problem is we need more leads, and we think we need more ads that are better, but in reality, we don't have a clear customer that we serve with a clear offer, and we're not budgeting enough to attract those people for statistical significance, right? That's a clear problem statement. But that probably was a composition of maybe your marketing person in the team, your operations person, your sales guy. It took all their little parts and pieces of what they might have described in the 4 core questions to reveal there was more to it than just leads. It was a part of marketing operations. It's a part of sales operations. It was a part of the way we're doing budgeting, right? Whatever. So good problem statements help, and identifying those root causes of the real problem, not the surface level problems, help us go from solving the wrong problem, which is a surface level problem, to solving the deep and right problem, which moves the needle and makes an impact. So if we're building towards those value horizons, now we're putting the right work in those value horizons rather than the surface level work, which is kind of repeating that hamster wheel that we've been on. Once we've done that, once we've actually got some of those problem statements defined, now we can look at a series of really clear problem statements. And as an executive team, as a leadership team, we can then look at those problems and say, oh, I get it. Now that I understand we've articulated these in meaningful ways, what it really looks like we want to prioritize are these handful of problems. If we solve these problems, they'd be the most impactful, right? So if you can imagine just creating really clear problem statements and coming up with a list of 10, 15, 20, which is not uncommon, by the way, when we do this in the workshops and stuff that I run, we can come up with really interesting, useful problems. And those problem statements then can be prioritized. And then we can ask ourselves, let's just work on this one problem. And let's ask ourselves, what are our best ideas to solve it? So then we go into what I call is how might we solutioning? What are our good ideas that can solution these problems? And so when we do that, we move from I have a problem statement to now how might we solve this problem? So we would just reframe that problem into a how might we statement. This is kind of what it looks like. How might we have clear budget with a clear customer that we want to serve with a clear offer and running an appropriate ad that speaks to that person? So that's a how might we in a sort of a rough form. And you might even boil that down to how might we have a better way to generate and acquire customers that are our best customer, fill in the blank, whatever that best customer type is. That would be good. How might we? And then from there, that statement, that how might we statement allows you to have a jumping off point for your best ideas. So you might say, well, let's get my friend Rachel, who is a great CMO, fractional CMO. Let's get Rachel involved, and she'll help us identify that avatar and build out part of our messaging kit around that best avatar. That'll allow us to go deep. That's a really good solution that we could do. Another one is, why don't we look at some of this technology, this software? I heard that, this funnel capability or this lead generation tool or whatever, right? This automation tool could be a good idea for how to address this issue, so on and so forth, right? So as you generate your good ideas, what'll naturally occur is a selection out of those best ideas to solve that clear problem statement that got reframed as a how might we statement. So I know these are a lot of different words flowing around here, but basically you're going to go from problem to solution, and those solutions are going to get prioritized in your value horizon. So that moves you from doing surface level work to now doing the right work. And the right work is now based on your highest priority problems that are well formed in a problem statement, and then that have had a good list of good ideas that have been prioritized in your value horizon. So you go from problem to a real set of solutions that can be clearly articulated as tasks or individual projects or initiatives, and those get prioritized in the value horizon. So now, in just a little bit of time, you've gone from not really having a team focused on the right problems to surfacing the right problems, talking through the right problems, reframing them in clear problem statements, and then prioritizing your best ideas to solve your best problems to get the results you want in your value horizons. So now that you've got your best problems, your highest impact problems, turning into real solutions, your highest impact solutions, now your team has a rhythm and a cadence and a way to go from the daily distractions and the fire drills and all that kind of stuff into a pattern of detecting the right problems, diagnosing the right problems, and then putting the right problems inside of a value horizon to be solved. And now that team is moving from surface level into the high impact needle movers, or what moves the business forward. And so that makes you more strategic instead of reactive and tactical. Now you become strategic because you're prioritizing the right work. And by the way, I always talk about strategy in this way so that you understand strategy is always about prioritizing our limited resources around what's valued and valuable so that you can create leverage around the future you desire most that you're actually creating, right? So that's good strategy. And that's what we're working through here, is how to prioritize our limited resources around what's valued and valuable inside those value horizons. And we're doing everything we can to come up with our good ideas that create leverage for the future we desire most. Number 3 here, big mistake is we don't have a uniform, predictable way that keeps everybody working together as a new and better way of working. And because of that, our expectations are missed. And when we have missed expectations, obviously we don't get the results we want. We have everything stalling down. It often causes even more reactionary chaos. And our meetings might even devolve into completely disruptive, non-productive sort of finger pointing or excuse making. And in environments where we don't have, high trust, or we don't have a lot of healthy systems in place with our team, we might get so bogged down that we never accomplish anything in our meetings. So we want to prevent all that by staying focused on the right work that actually moves the needle. And we talk about and collaborate together. And we want to structure that inside sprints. And so sprints allow you to take a more systematic approach to the work and making the work more digestible. So instead of these really big goals that feel like an elephant-sized goal, you break them down into smaller parts, and the smaller parts get sort of pursued. They get hunted down, for lack of a better way to say it, in a sprint. And so that creates a whole new rhythm of decision making and how do we mobilize and prioritize in order to make the biggest impact. So as we've got the value horizons defined and our best ideas inside those, now we can articulate milestones, action items, deadline items, smaller tasks that all are in pursuit of our best ideas for that value horizon. And we do that in 2-week, 3-week, or 4-week sprints. I like to do 2-week sprints, and that's what I always recommend we start with. Some people will do it up to a 4-week sprint. But I want you to think about this. If you have 4-week sprints and you create this routine of every 4 weeks, you're chewing through this highly planned, highly prioritized, high impact work, imagine how much faster you're able to build the business in 12 cycles of 4 weeks compared to if you just do goal planning, right? So that's a good sort of operational improvement. Now, if you think about you have 12 cycles, what if you did that every 2 weeks? And that immediately moves you to 24 cycles. So 24 cycles to interact with the business challenge, overcome that business challenge, deliver value, create value, deliver value against that business challenge, and then level up on it. So that's why I like to start with 2-week sprints, because even if we don't hit the mark and we're developing our early routines, like we're still delivering value faster and we get to level up on the business. So every time we ship new value, we get to stand on that value to go to the next part, like literally taking the stair steps up. And a lot of times goals aren't achieved because they stay too ambiguous. It's too unclear what the goal is actually going to do. And if you have a 6-month goal, most people by human nature we'll delay on actions for that goal, especially when it's unclear, until we get closer to the finish line. It's like college all over again. We just wait until the exams are due before we turn in our homework or whatever, right? It's that same kind of thinking. And unfortunately, we've had a lot more time in our, conditioning training to deliver on a deadline than we have to be systematic and deliberate in our actions. So sprints help us have a deadline that's more clear, with actions that are more clear, that are around what must be true for us to generate our biggest and best results. And so sprints move us into action with focus and clarity and prioritization around what's most important and what's most impactful, based on our most prioritized problems with our best ideas that generate the most result in that value rising. So sprints allow us to sort of systematically get that motion started, and then that kicks off a flywheel of value creation. Once that's all in place, now we've got a cohesive system that's moving everybody forward in a meaningful way. Instead of being in fire drills, we're able to see what's really going on, dig down, tap into the collective genius, come up with our clear problems, move them into some sense of prioritization based on impact. And then from impact, we move them into sprints. And this allows us to have tons of accountability, alignment, and focus. And people can have the confidence of knowing, hey, the thing that I thought was really important turned out to not be as important as these 10 other things, but this sprint will close out, and then my thing might be showing up in the next sprint or whatever. But the key is, it's not about your individual thing as much as it is realizing what's blocking value, what's holding the business back, what's keeping things in this disrupted pattern. And you systematically clear all that stuff out. And once you do all that, now your business moves faster and it goes forward faster. So that kind of clears the operating queue, but it also puts in the value generating material, right? It's the big ideas that move the business forward, that create new value. So you're kind of doing both at the same time, and you're doing it through a predictable manner of these cyclical sprints every 2 weeks. And then you develop a real rhythm of working on the business, improving the business, while also handling some of the execution focus, the tactical focus that you might have been stuck in, and you're able to systematically get out of that. This is a huge value, because as you start to work the organization, whether it's the call center or the customer care team, or it's the operations team or finance team or sales team or marketing or whatever, what you find is this particular process begins to mechanize the business in a high performance way, without necessarily making everybody feel like they're being leaned on in some way, because their strengths are able to show. Things that you're not clear on or good at, they can be prioritized. You can bring the right people in at the right time, because now everybody's having the right conversation, and that conversation allows good solutions. And sometimes the good solution isn't that John does more work. Sometimes the good solution is John's really good at this work, he needs to do that. Somebody else needs to be accountable for this other work so that we can get it done. That's good strategy. That's good prioritization. That's good focus. That moves the business forward. So there you go. If you found that your team was stuck, stalled out, too many decisions being left on the CEO's plate, hopefully now you can see where, with a little bit of attention, a little bit of focus, you can systematically, little bit by bit, part by part, put these things in place so that the leadership team is teed up to do their best work with these couple of improvements that are able to move the business forward. And then you can have a predictable way of working. And this predictable way of working goes from taking your biggest challenges that are coming into the business on a regular basis, preventing the fire drill kind of response, and instead saying, what are we going to do about it? How do we plan it based on getting to the root problems, and then identifying what's the most impactful things to solve. Then we prioritize it, put it in a value horizon. Then we do a sprint against it to make sure that work gets delivered. And then we come back up and we start that process again. And then we just get better at the work. So no more chaos, no hub and spoke, no going insular, no siloing, no lone wolves where we feel like, man, one guy's got to be a hero and work 90 hours this week. Like, we're going to fix all that with this better, improved way of thinking, so that the leadership team is empowered and enabled to do its most significant work, living up to their fullest potential by having a shared vocabulary around getting the work done, solving the right problems, being aligned on the right problems, and then being able to articulate them in 2, 4, 8, 12 weeks. Build that out as a part of the value horizons. Hope this helped you. Please leave a comment below. If you like this, subscribe and check out fourcorequestions.com.